60 minutes here on Newsnight. Investors in cocoa bills to get their monies by close of week after Friday's shock default as BOG directs Ghana Cocoa Board to pay up with the institution suffering cash flow challenges.
I don't have a date for you, but I can assure you that these individual investors will be paid, and hopefully that happens this week.
Plus, what is really happening with Treasury bill subscriptions as government Treasury bill sale falls short of its target 20% as uncertainty over the debt action program continues. Membership base for individual bondholders forum inches towards 400,000 as government technical committee continue discussions on fate of the bonds. We have the very latest for you as the individual bondholders push for exemption with their numbers growing exponentially. Also tonight, minority in parliament calls for the immediate suspension of the Go for Oil deal, citing transparency issues. As they serve notice, they will use every parliamentary process available to get to the bottom of the deal.
We are calling on government to halt this so-called gold for oil butter and consult further. Already, the Chamber of Mines has complained. Indeed, if you look at the structure, today government owes GOIL over 300 million cedis.
We have details as they warn the Bank of Ghana not to burn through Ghana's gold reserve to sponsor the gold for oil barter deal.
Which gold did they use as barter for this oil? It is important. And let me caution the Bank of Ghana that any attempt to deplete our gold reserves for this so-called oil barter deal would be resisted by the minority.
Also tonight, we are suffering words of the president of the Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools to describe the food shortage in some second cycle institutions in the country.
It meant that they will eat cocoa in the morning, cocoa in the afternoon, cocoa in the day without sugar and bread. And the quantity, gosh, it's not the best.
We hear the frustration of parents.
For us as PA, when we do any contribution, we buy the foodstuffs and deliver it to the school. That's what we are able to do for now. But I believe if it's made, if it is approved, and we are to even pay 500 cedis or 600 cedis, all put together just for feeding of our kids, I think that'll be fine.
But why is the Education Ministry denying there is food shortage when even the Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools say they are suffering? Stay with us for details in business.
Ghana cedi continues to stabilize firmly against the dollar as Bank of Ghana's support for the market picks up strongly.
And in sports, after less than a year, Frank Lampard has been sacked as head coach of English Premier League side Everton. In 50 minutes, we will tell you why.
Apologies there. We will hear in sports.
And in sports, after less than a year, Frank Lampard has been sacked as head coach of Everton Football Club. In 50 minutes, we'll tell you why.
You want to stay with us for sports and business or later, plus your views and comments all here on News 905511111997. My name is Evan Smith, and let's start with that big developing story surrounding the cocoa bills that have sent shockwaves across the investment community and the financial sector at large. Investors should get their monies by the close of the week. That's the assurance on the Bank of Ghana after unilaterally directing banks to roll over returns in the 182-day cocoa bills last Thursday. That was a shock default that many did not anticipate. Individuals who bought those bills had their monies credited into their accounts, and a day later, the monies were withdrawn without their permission. Expectant customers who purchased a bill went to retrieve their investment last Friday, only to be informed that there has been unilaterally been rolled over because of a BOG directive. Listen to one of the customers who spoke to me early on Friday.
When it matured, the funds were deposited in the account, and I decided to go to the bank today. And when I went there today, the money had been taken out of the account. And when I asked, the tellers were not able to tell me anything. They just said that it's a directive that has come for all the funds to be automatically rolled over. And I was asking that, if money has come into an account, I have a contract with the account that money should be deposited in the account. I don't have any contract with the bank that monies will be taken out of the account without my permission. and that has happened. Why should it happen? And they say that is a directive, and there's little they can tell me than to say that there was a directive that all the money should be rolled over.
Well, the Bank of Ghana has been explaining what economists have described as a blunder, considering the existing apprehension in the financial sector. Because of the current deduction program, the central bank says it expects that the short-term cash flow challenges facing cocoa board, which in itself is one big issue, will be resolved soon to enable the cocoa regulator meet its obligations to investors. Listen to Stephen Opata, who is a director of financial markets at the central bank.
The auction was severely undersubscribed by 855.42 million. And he also writes in previous times there were some undersubscriptions, and we had to come into cocoa board to look at a way of addressing this significant shortfall. So at that meeting, it was agreed that for the institutional investors, they roll over their investment so that at least the shortfall will be minimized. And for those individuals who bought the bill, we also agreed that Cocoa Board will look for other financing from deposits that it has with some of the banks to clear. So that's what happened.
Okay, so the interest for many of these investors is the actual timelines that has been communicated from the BOG to the Cocoa Board as to when exactly these returns will be paid, because most of them have made plans for this particular returns only to be told that it's been rolled over unilaterally by the BOG.
So in terms of timelines for the individuals who invested in this instrument, this cocoa bill, currently we're working with the CSD, looking at the data and seeing the quantum of individuals who were affected by this. I think that exercise is going on right now. Once we ascertain that, we are working with Cocoa Board to look at its balances with the various banks and see how we can quickly pay these individuals. Well, so that is ongoing, right?
Are we sure if we are going to get it by close of week, by close of day? When exactly can I get my funds?
I don't have a date for you, but I can assure you that these individual investors will be paid, and hopefully that happens this week.
Well, point 3 of your statement points to an unfortunate development. You say you've noticed that financial institutions are selling to retail clients, which is not supposed to be the case. How is it that as regulators, your banking supervision did not flag this and issue regulatory directive and waited till we got here?
When these bills will be, are being issued, we send out a notice to banks, and banks are invited to bid for the subscription of the cocoa bills. Actually, this happens on a particular day. So, for example, the one we're talking about, it happened on Thursday, and this must be electronically submitted through an auction model not later than 1 p.m. on that day. And then settlements takes place the same day. Now, the notice spells out clearly that banks are eligible to participate. But it appears that some banks were aggregating, that is, they were pulling resources together from their clients and bringing it to the auction. So it looks like it was a gray area. And now that we've seen this, we will take steps to make sure that this is clarified and cleaned up. So if you look at the notice, it was clear that banks are eligible to participate. It did not say that individuals are, but we've seen with this one and individuals were affected. And that's quite unfortunate that happened. And as I've assured you, we will do all in our powers working with Cocoa Board to make sure that they are settled, hopefully this week, and clarify the narrative so that in subsequent issuances, individuals do not participate.
Well, the issues about legal rights also have come up. Do we have such rights as the BOG to actually roll over returns, legal returns from accounts without explicit consent from account holders?
I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to get into legal rights here. What I can says that the issue is being looked at to make sure that the individual account holders get their cash flows that's due to them because of this investment, and that will happen hopefully very soon.
Considering the times that we're in, have we considered the potential threat this poses to the entire financial sector and the economy at large?
We are fully aware and have been involved in this domestic debt restructuring and exchange that the debt manager is undertaking right now. So we are fully aware of the situation, but we're also mindful that as a monetary policy maker, that our actions also doesn't fuel unintended consequences such as inflation. So the Bank of Ghana is also pursuing its role as a central bank to make sure that the processes are working well, and it's not intended to create any shocks to the system, but to make sure that when failing auctions are appropriately corrected.
So that's Mr. Stephen Opata with the Bank of Ghana, and he touches on the question of how come cocoa bills that was only meant for banks also got into the hands of individual investors, how the banks found what he calls a gray area and still went ahead and got individual customers to buy these bonds when they were not supposed to do so. Well, he explains that it is a gray area and they've learned from that and they are going to enforce this going forward. However, we have tracked back to last year when the cocoa bills was issued. And on that particular Bank of Ghana announcement of the auction of the cocoa bill, we find that it was explicitly stated by the Bank of Ghana that this was only for banks. In fact, let me read to you what it says on this auction notice. It says, note, banks are reminded that the 273-day BOG bill as is an instrument for the interbank is only is instrument for interbank. It is available to only banks, and therefore banks should not submit bids for their customers. Customers' bids should be directed to Treasury bills and bonds. And as he says, Mr. Pata says that this is something they're going to look into. Let's interrogate this a bit more. Let's bring in economist Dr. Richmond Kwame Frimpong. Doc, thanks for your time here on Newsnight. I mean, so we hear from the Bank of Ghana right now. They call this a gray area and something that they believe will not happen again. What's your take on that?
Thank you, Evans. I think it's becoming challenging looking at the feedback we are picking now. And it's basically sparking a gap of maybe a regulatory kind of lapse, so to speak. And particularly for these times, it becomes a bit worrying. Now, that means that the instruction to get the banks to now roll over unilaterally went through because in the eyes of the Bank of Ghana, they were just dealing with the banks. So when it sparked back a certain kind of feedback, and those feedback was coming from the retail market, then the central bank needed to now go back to check maybe the size, the scope, the numbers, and then decided to say, look, let's deal with the individuals separately. Let's ring fence them. And then you, the banks, can take the ones that belong to you. Now, what it means is that, but for that, the old instruction of unilateral rollover would have stood. And so it's quite worrying. Now, cocoa bills are not bonds. And this is not the first time individuals have been exposed to buying cocoa bills. In fact, there are even instances where brokerage houses, through CSD accounts, buy for individuals.
You mean this is not the first time this has happened?
No.
But when you listen to Stephen Opata of the BOG, he suggests this is the first time the BOG is coming to terms with the reality, which obviously says it already existed, that individuals were actually buying cocoa bills.
So from what is being explained, you see that in the last auction, I think there was clarity to say this one is specifically for institutional. And so I think it was a bit surprising to them to see that despite that explicit instruction, still some individuals still were able to buy. Now, that simply meant that some of the banks bought as institutional, but then bought on behalf of their clients. And so they solicited bids individually and then purchased maybe together en bloc for them. Or they just took the bids through their CSD accounts and made purchases for them. Whichever way, it's still a challenge in terms of regulatory supervision. And I think it's really need to be looked at, as they said.
What should happen to these banks? I mean, Mr. Potter says, well, we're going to look into it. It's a gray area. Now we've learnt our lesson going forward. But if it was explicit and the banks knew, then somebody possibly was being very deliberate in circumventing the rules. Should we see sanctions?
Well, let's look at the scope. We really need to check the scope. So if every bank that participated in this almost brought in retail investors, then we should really double check if indeed it went out as explicit as it has been explained. But if it is found that a few of these banks were corporates to now opening up for individuals to come in, then that exception rule may apply. Because if it so happens that all the banks that participated did not comply, then maybe there is something else the banks will need to stick to. But if it's just a few, then I agree. Maybe there could be sanctions.
I'm grateful, Dr. Richmond Kwame Frimpong, who is an economist, joining us on this really mind-boggling development with the cocoa bills. And I'll tell you why the impact of that possibly is now being felt with the issuance of Treasury bills, and that has been undersubscribed. Barely a week after that first subscription was oversubscribed. They may be feeling an impact of the current lack of confidence in the investment markets generally. But I have some developing news for you tonight, and I want to get to that because it's we are learning some fresh details as far as the government debt exchange program is concerned, and some agreement that may have just been reached with some financial institutions. George Jaffe is joining me with details.
So,
of this.
Evans, we've been following up on this engagement that is going on, but what we can report now, based on we tracking what is happening, is that some significant progress has been made between the banks and government with respect to these banks participating fully in the domestic debt exchange program. Also, we understand that government has agreed to pay about 5% on coupons that will mature this year.
5% on
5% that will mature this year.
Instead of zero.
Instead of zero. So going forward as well, there will be some reviews to the other papers that's supposed to be maturing in the following years as well. What we're also picking up from this engagement that is going on is that, well, even though in principle this significant progress has been made, the Banks Association also say that this would be dependent on these individual banks taking this agreement to their shareholders and their board of directors to give that final approval. It looks like these banks are also kind of satisfied with the framework that have been put together in terms of them getting access to this stabilization fund that they can fall on to help stabilize the institution. So if you could use your words carefully, they've made some 80% or 90% progress in terms of they are pending their signature to this deal between the government of Ghana and these banks in participating in the domestic exchange program. And even if you look at the backstory, I can say that one of the major reasons why this program was extended was because the banks were not willing to participate.
Yeah, because they hold the lion's share of the ball.
So if this progress that we are picking up that they have reached pending to signing those final deal, it appears that the economists will say all other things being equal, we could have these banks coming on board if indeed they can go with the wording or the agreement by government of Ghana on this domestic debt exchange program.
Let's break this down. So as far as the agreement is concerned, what are the specific details? Bullet them for us.
So what we are picking up, Evans, is that in terms of the coupons, for 2023, government is proposing 5% to be paid on these bonds for 2023. We also understand that going forward, there will be the new bonds that might be issued. We'll be looking at an interest, a coupon rate of about 9% as well. And this is what we're also picking up as well.
But at the same that's not a change, because previously it was an average of 9-10% going forward. So that
so again, even as I told you, that this is about 90%, and these are from what we are picking up from reliable sources, about 90% close to pending their signature to this deal. Also, it looks like the banks are now satisfied in terms of the framework and the terms for them to get access to this Ghana stabilization
They've
of
been
financial.
asking for that clarity.
And now they have that clarity as well.
Okay.
And also for that, the fact that they've also, and I understand that even for the what do you call it, the Ghana Association of the Bar Association as well, there was a clause in the original agreement that was put forward that allowed government to amend the clause in terms of the domestic debt exchange program.
Yeah, in the future.
Now that has been taken out.
Okay.
So if a deal is reached today,
you can't touch it going forward.
You can't touch or vary it going forward. And it looks like that has given, again, some comfort in terms of these commercial banks. But again, one critical thing is that even though we have these number of commercial banks, they have to take these agreements
back to
their individual banks, their boards of directors and shareholders before they could say that they have reached a deal.
One big question, this agreement is it only between banks and the government? Or because insurers are there, the securities, individual bondholders? What is it?
It looks like from what we are picking up right now, Evans, maybe it has to do with the banks.
Only
that
the
is
banks.
what we can say based on what we are
picking up. So this 5%,
is
it only to institutional investors or to individual? Because individual bondholders are clearly want an exemption.
Again, what I got the understanding previously was that is also going to go to individual holders. Okay. But again, from what we have right now, it appears that it is going to the commercial banks. But I also understand that government is working to exempt pensioners and those who are over 65
from
years.
The individuals
who might be exempted from this.
Okay.
And it appears that looking at the way things are going, individuals, also government, will again propose this 5% to these individual holders.
As the government will propose a 5% interest for 2023 to individual bondholders. As we know, the individual bondholders are negotiating
but
with
you see,
it
takes two to tango. And even though they have made significant progress, just issue a caveat that it is not over until it's over.
So, quickly, are we expecting a statement on this?
Maybe
details?
We should expect some announcement, from these actors with respect to this progress that they've made on this domestic debt exchange program.
George, thank you very much for that breaking news story as far as the debt exchange program is concerned. I want to bring in Martin Kpebu. Martin Kpebu is a convener with the Individual Bondholders Association of Ghana. You remember they've come together with the Individual Bondholders Forum, and he's part of the team that has been sitting down with the Finance Ministry's own technical team to trash out how they can be exempted, how the individual bondholders can be exempted. Mr. Kpebu, thank you for your time here on Newsnight.
Yeah, good evening, Evans.
So, these details that we are learning from that agreement that has now been struck between the government and the banks, and George was suggesting there that this 5% may be something that may be proposed to the individual bondholders as well. What do you make of this? You sat in the room with the Finance Ministry's technical team. Do you have any agreement at all?
Not at all, Evans. Not in the direction Mr. Wiase is coming from. So let's be clear, Evans. So number one, since government has made huge, let's say significant progress with the banks, then that's good news, because then that means that it reinforces our argument that individual bondholders should be exempt. So the more progress government makes with the banks, then the likelier it is that we'll walk away 100% exempt. And that will be good for the economy, because households are usually the long-term providers of funds for government development. By buying these instruments over and over, we provide funds. So government has to be careful not to kill the goose that lays the golden egg, right? Is that how you put it?
Yeah.
So it's good that government is making progress. Now, come back to individual bondholders. Let's be very clear. Evans, this 5% Mr. Riafe is mentioned is not on the table. We are not aware of any such 5%. The thing is that the finance minister set up the technical committee to go look at ways of, one, help showing government how to cut down expenditure. Because, we had been trumpeting that argument. Capital expenditure. There's 27 billion earmarked for capital expenditure. Cut it. Then later we added recurrent expenditure. So by the time we go into the meeting, that argument had been well made and resonated amongst the populace. Everybody agreed. So the finance minister said, okay, go into the committee and provide more specifics and also show where else you think government can raise revenue. So raise revenue, cut expenditure. These are the main things. But as I said, cutting expenditure was the main aim, the main reason for the committee. So as I speak to you now, nobody has approached us with 5% or any other percentage. And actually, the committee doesn't have any mandate to negotiate percentages. No. But as far as we are concerned, going into that committee, it wasn't to go and negotiate any percentages. And nobody has come to us with any percentages. Evans, that one, I can tell you, nobody has come to us with any percentages. So if you hear any percentages, of course, maybe it's a card government is holding to its chest, but I really don't see how that will come into play in the committee. The doors are shut. That's not the remit.
When is the next technical committee meeting between the individual bondholders and the finance ministry?
Well, it could be tomorrow. What we've done is that having sat down and done the areas we think there should be adjustments on all that, we decided that, okay, the rest of the work could be by emails in the interim. So look at the work we did, read over, reflect, add, subtract, and then send it across to each other, and then we'll determine when next to meet. So we don't need a fiscal meeting, though we haven't done a fiscal meeting today, but we are working because we are still perfecting the document. And as I can mention, there's no space for percentages there in terms of this year, take 5% or 10%. No.
When are we hoping for some closure to this before the expiration of that deadline come to the first?
This week. I don't see it going beyond Friday unless the unexpected happens. But in the ordinary course of things, we should be done latest Friday. In the interim,
for individual bondholders who are listening to you right now, what do you tell them?
Hold the line. And that is that 100% exempt. That's the message. We are asking for an exemption, 100%. Exemption. That's it.
And you remember the last time there were some individual bondholders who suggested banks were calling them almost to lure them into signing documents. What should they do if they are called again this time before the expiration of the deadline?
Please don't sign any forms. Don't append your signature to any document that seeks to add you to the debt exchange. Please don't sign. And we are making that very clear to members. Please don't sign. And for those who have signed, understand government has now opened the window that you can come in there or go in there and take back your offers because you are making the offer. Government has not yet accepted them. And so I understand there's been provision for individual bondholders to go back and retrieve their offers. That's for those who have signed up. You can go retrieve your forms, and that'll be it.
Thank you very much. That's Martin Kpebu. Martin Kpebu is a convener with the Individual Bondholders Forum, and still on this issue and its ramifications, especially on the back of the cocoa bill's default. Government Treasury bill sale fell short of its target by 20% as uncertainty over the debt exchange program continues. According to the auction results, government mobilized 1.9 billion cedis against a target of 2.4 billion cedis. There's more in this report.
The undersubscription of the Treasury bills is in sharp contrast to the 52% oversubscription recorded the previous week. The 91-day Treasury bill was the highly patronized by the investors as 1.58 billion cedis was secured from the sale of the short-term instrument. Despite the maturity period being shorter than the 182-day and 364-day Treasury bills, the interest rate of the free financial instruments were virtually unchanged at 35%. The rate on the 182-day and 364-day, however, fell marginally, whilst the one-year bill went up slightly. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta last week, in an exclusive interview with Joy Business, said it will be suicidal if Treasury bills is included in the debt exchange program because it is currently the only source of borrowing for government. Despite his pronouncements, the sale of the short-term securities has been mixed in recent times.
Well, the finance minister, as you just heard there, I had told you, Joy News, says George Rafe, that in fact Treasury bills remains the only way government is financing its operations for a broke, country. So, what does this really mean now that it's been undersubscribed? Well, listen to the finance minister first, and then we'll explore its implications.
But Treasury bills, Treasury bills are exempted. I mean, George, we have done...
And that is an assurance from you, Mr. Minister.
Completely.
Treasury bills will not be touched going forward.
No, because we have done the sustainability analysis, not including Treasury bills. That really is how government funds its operations.
That really is how government funds its operations. I want to bring in Dean of the University of Cape Coast Business School, Professor John Gachi. Prof, thank you for your time here on Newsline.
Thank you.
Considering that, as the finance minister says, Treasury bills is currently the only means through which government funds its operations. When we have a 20% under subscription, how bad can it get, or can it be for this economy?
Well, I think it's just a reflection of the uncertainty in the market. That is reflected in people not asking the banks to roll over the maturing treasury bills. The banks themselves are not committing so much money into the treasury bill. So that is what is going on until we find some certainty in the market. Then perhaps people will have comfort and begin to buy the treasury bill. So that is what is going on. Again, in terms of the return is not real, something that people will think about because we talk about inflation rates hovering around 54%, and most treasury bills is also below that. So that is a concern. So until the market is put together, confidence is resumed. Perhaps that reaction will be seen maybe in the next round of auction.
But if this is how we are funding our operations currently as a government, what does this mean for government operations then, if people refuse to subscribe to it?
I'm not sure that is the only way by which we are funding government operations. We are collecting taxes on a daily basis. That is also part of the way we are funding the finances of the country.
Prof, but the finance minister was categorical. It's the only way currently we borrow to finance our operations. Those are his words.
Yeah, that is true. But when you talk about overall financing of the government operation, it's not only from this treasury bill. It's also from the taxes that we collect on a daily basis. So that cannot be the absolute truth.
But do you anticipate that critical areas of government activity may suffer?
Well, it depends on the expectation of how much government expects from the treasury bill. Of course, we have seen 20% down the target, and that means that government operations will suffer somehow.
Prof, thank you very much for your time here on Newsnight. Still ahead, we are suffering. Words of the president of the Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools to describe the food shortage crisis at the senior high schools.
It meant that they will eat cocoa in the morning, cocoa in the afternoon, cocoa in the day without sugar and bread. And the quantity, gosh, it's not the best.
George Face here with Business. Hello, John.
Hi, Evans. And coming up, commercial banks make significant progress towards signing the domestic debt exchange program. And Bank of Ghana institutes measures to prevent investment instrument purposely designed for institutional firms to be sold to retail investors. The business news on Newsnight is brought to you by MTN Business. Welcome to the new world of business, Alliance Life and Ghana Pay. You're welcome back to Business on Newsnight. Now, the Bank of Ghana says it has instituted measures to prevent investment instruments purposely meant for institutional firms and commercial banks being sold out to retail investors. It's coming after the Bank of Ghana announced that commercial banks that bought the cocoa bills breached the agreement under the deal by reselling the products to retail investors. Let's hear from Stephen Opata, his head of financial markets at the Bank of Ghana.
So it's clear that banks are eligible to participate. It did not say that individuals are, but we've seen with this one and individuals were affected, and that's quite unfortunate that happened. And as I've assured you, we will do all in our powers, working with Cocoa Board to make sure that they are settled, hopefully this week, and clarify the narrative so that in subsequent issuances, individuals do not participate.
Stephen Opata is head of financial markets at the Bank of Ghana. And government has made some significant progress towards commercial banks signing up to the domestic debt exchange program. Now, Joy Business understands that the banks may be agreeing to a 5% coupon payment for this year. The bank's decision to also sign this deal has been influenced by the fact that they are comfortable with the operational framework and terms for them to access the Ghana Financial Stability Fund. They are also comfortable by the fact that there's been some amendments made to clauses in the domestic debt exchange program with respect to agreements reached today will be binding forever. Now, we also understand that these commercial banks, even though they have agreed in principle to what government has proposed, the individual banks reserve the right to take this deal to their individual banks for their shareholders and the board of directors to approve the deal before they fully come on board to sign up to the domestic debt exchange program. Now, economist Dr. Patrick Esumi is worried that the government's quest to quickly secure a deal with individual bondholders could suffer some setbacks. Now, this was after the latest Auditor General's report actually identified serious infractions on how these donor funds were used. Dr. Simin fears that the report could further strengthen the case of these individual bondholders to completely reject the domestic debt exchange program.
The government has been trying to have conversations with individual bondholders and other bondholders, really, to convince them that we are sharing burden and therefore they should contribute their quota to help fix the current difficulties we have. I think this makes the government case more difficult to make because, people are going to say, well, we were here when you have mismanaged public funds. Why should I sacrifice my hard-earned savings just to help fix the situation? So I think government faces a more difficult task convincing, especially the domestic bondholders, that they should be making more sacrifices. So in a sense, this could actually delay the process because, whatever discussions that people were having with the government, people will see this report and say, well, some people might demand that if we are going to make any sacrifices, the government should show us more commitment in terms of how it's going to manage its finances going forward.
Dr. Patrick Esumi is an economist. The government has defaulted on its first interest payment for this year to holders of its Eurobond that will mature on 2026. Now, this was after it failed to pay $41 million to bondholders on January 18, 2023. There is more in this report.
For some market analysts, it was expected, especially after government announced in December 2022 about freezing interest payments. This was due to the current challenges facing the economy and the move to manage the pressures on the country's international reserves. The development has resulted in Standard and Poor's downgrade the ratings assigned to Ghana's ability to pay holders of the 2026 Eurobond to D, that is default, or what some might call further junk status. Government has indicated that the debt freeze will offer it an opportunity to come back with a better deal in terms of how these debts can be settled going forward. But for some, The concern might be what will be the impact of these actions on private firms operating in the country and the larger economy going forward.
Well, that is a business desk report. Now let's talk about the currency, because the Ghana cedi continues to stabilize firmly against the dollar. Now checks on the interbank market show the local currency has been trading around 13 Ghana cedis for the past 10 working days. You will need 13 Ghana cedis to get a dollar from these commercial banks. Now this is based on the average quotes that some of these commercial banks are offering to their clients. However, when you turn to the Forex Bureau, about 13 Ghana cedis, 20 pesos, should get you a dollar. Now, some of the bank treasurers have attributed the fair stability to a pickup in dollar support that is coming from the Bank of Ghana to the commercial banks. And that's all for business on Newsnight.
George, thank you very much. Well, today we've been hearing from many parents who have children in the senior high schools across the country. They've been complaining about food shortage and the poor quality that their children have been receiving in these schools. Some of them spoke on the Super Morning Show.
The schools have received flour without margarine or butter. How do they bake? They have rice and beans without oil, without gari. What are they going to eat? Please, let's humble ourselves and we'll have a reflective and somewhat reflective to at least understand the situation and allow parents to help. PTAs are not even allowed to contribute.
I want to speak now to Charles. That's a conference of heads of assisted secondary schools. President of the conference is Reverend Father Stephen Owusu-Setra. Joins us on the telephone line right now. Reverend, thanks for your time on your news night.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everybody.
You just had a parent there complaining. What's the situation?
So thank you very much for this opportunity. The situation, I cannot say is totally good. Some schools have received some food items, but the problem is that the food items that they have received, if you put them together, cannot really feed the students. For example, if you have a school that has maybe maize, gari, rice, sugar without oil, cooking oil, it will be very difficult for you to cook for the students. In fact, in some schools, they have received some items, but others have not been received. We are talking about 18 food items here. In some regions in the country, the situation is not that good. I can say it's fair. We go to Upper West region. Some of the items are in zero supply. For example, if we talk of soya bean, Tom Brown, maize. About 9 schools have not received maize in the Upper West region. If you go to palm oil, 15 schools in the Upper West region have not received palm oil. And then beans, the highest received in bags in the region is only 6 bags. So this is the report receiving currently from the regional charge chairman as I am speaking with you. If you come to Ashanti region, some of the food items that are in zero supply, for example, soya bean, margarine. We have flour, but we don't have margarine. And if you want to bake bread for the students, you need the margarine, but you have not received the margarine yet. If you talk about peanut, vegetable cooking oil, and palm oil, some schools have received them, but others have not. If you talk of gari, maize, and millet, about 5% of the schools in Ashanti region have not received. So it's like you have one food item and you don't have the rest. If you go to the central region, some food items have not been received at all. In fact, you talk about sardine, I think only one school in the central region has received sardine. And the food item like soya bean, margarine, about only one school has received margarine in the central region. So it is like that. But I am told that in another region, they get delivery of some food items at some zonal centers If you have some zonal centers where they will come and dump the food items there, and then they will now cut the food items to the schools. So we are entreating the suppliers to pick the food items and send them to the schools. So that is the situation as I speak with you. Some food items have been received, others have not been received. And the difficulty here is that some schools have received items. When you put together, you find it difficult to feed the students. So if you don't have sugar, if you don't have items like oil, you find it difficult to cook the rice, the beans, and the gari for the students. So the situation is not really good on the ground. So we are entreating the authorities to ensure that you receive the full complement of the food items in the school, so that we be at peace to feed the students. That's the situation.
So when the parents say that their children are they are being compelled to eat cocoa without sugar, the beans in itself in not in good shape, as you've just, that is the reality, because you don't have the full complement of what you need to give them proper meals.
Yes, so that one could be true, because not every school, but they cannot say that every school has not received sugar. As I said, in some regions the sugar is in shortage, in other regions they have sugar. But some of these items are not in larger quantities, but some of them have sugar but in smaller quantities. If a school is given maybe a bag of sugar, you can imagine what the school can
so
use.
are schools being compelled to ration what you have?
Say that again, please.
Are schools being compelled to ration what you have?
We as headmasters and headmistresses, there's nothing we can do than to use and manage what we have at our stores or in our stores to feed the students. So you just look at what you have and feed the students with them. Thank you.
And based on what you have, how long will that last you? 1 week, 2 weeks, a couple of 3 weeks, a month?
That one depends on the quantities supplied to the schools and the quantity sent to the regions. For example, if you come to my school, maybe I can feed for the next 2 weeks, depending on the items. Some of the items could be used to feed the students for maybe 3 days. Others could go for maybe a month. Others could go for a week. So we are waiting for the rest, as been promised, to be delivered to us.
I mean,
that's the situation now.
You make an interesting point. So in your school, what you have will last a week, 2 weeks.
I'm saying some items could last for 3 days. Some could last for 2 weeks. Others could last for maybe 3 weeks. That's how far I can go with some of the items.
If by the end of, say, the 3rd week you don't get new
stock, if I don't receive them, then it means I'm going to run into trouble. But we have been promised that they will supply in bulk the rest of the items that were delivered in smaller quantities, and the same applies to other schools. Other schools have not received some items at all. As I've told you already, the items received, if you combine, could not even feed the students, because for example, if you want your students to eat bread and you don't have margarine, you cannot bake bread for them.
I mean, so you mean there are schools that have nothing at all?
For now, in fact, last week some schools had nothing. But for now, every school has something. But some have something, but what they have put together, they find it difficult to feed the students. As I said, if you have gari and beans, and then you have rice, and you don't have cooking oil, to be difficult to feed the students.
So when you hear the Education Ministry spokesperson say that some of the claims are not true, are not a true reflection of the situation on the ground, what do you say to that?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that, because I don't know what he meant by some of the claims. So which claims was he talking about?
I mean, when many parents called in and saying that, as I explained, their kids are being forced to eat cocoa without sugar, some without bread. The beans is terrible because some of the ingredients are not in it. Just a whole host of complaints from parents. He says some of those claims may be an exaggeration, not a true reflection.
I wouldn't say that they are not true, because if you do that, you will be doing what's called argumentum ad ignorantiam. That is, you are arguing out of ignorance because you don't know it's not true. So you should go and check first before you say it's not true, because it could be real and it's true because it is happening.
And finally, have you had parents come to say they want to feed their own children? And what do you say when they come with that request?
I cannot really tell parents to come and feed their own students in the schools, because that is not the policy now. For us heads, what we do is just implement what has been given to us to implement by our directors. So if you're a parent and you come, and then, for example, parents come together and then they say, oh, we want to donate this to the school, I'll receive them and feed the students with them. But I will not say that parents will come and pay fees for me to feed the students anyway. But if parents are ready, because we have been told that parents could meet on their own, and then they will think about what the school needs. If they come and ask me and I need them and they bring them, I'll receive them and use them for the students. Why not? But it is not like you could call parents in to come and pay fees. That one is not part of the policy.
Thank you very much, Reverend. And that's the president of the Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools, Reverend Father Stephen Owusu-Setri. Let's do sports now. Amit Powers here with details.
Yes, Evans, what we understand is that Everton have sacked manager Frank Lampard after less than a year in charge at Goodison Park. The defeat at fellow stragglers West Ham United on Saturday was Everton's 9th loss in 12 Premier League games. They're second from bottom of the table with 15 points from 20 matches, about Southampton on goal difference. Former England midfielder Lampard replaced Benitez in January 2022 with the team 16th in the table and helped Everton avoid relegation. At the moment, Everton will be looking for their 6th permanent manager in 5 years. And just interestingly, it was Arsenal who beat Manchester United on Sunday, but in Uganda, at least 8 Arsenal fans have been arrested in the Ugandan city of Jinja after celebrating the club's win against Manchester United in the English Premier League. According to the authorities, they were celebrating without permit, and for which reason they're currently behind bars, and this has sparked some controversy in Uganda there.
They were arrested in Jinja. Yeah, it was no ginger for the celebration. Thank you, Ms. Bao. Now, 40 years has passed since Ghana suffered severe hunger and famine. This period of hardship was quite different from any experience in the history of the nation. My colleague Jacqueline Sumayebwa, in following a report, recounts this phase through lenses of those who experienced it up close.
Ghana experienced its worst and most severe drought 40 years ago. This devastating famine began in 1981 and peaked in 1983. Crop yield began to dwindle. Drought and bushfires destroyed many farms. Kwame Moses, a driver, was 14 years at the time and recalls his family lost all their food crops to bushfire.
People were really suffering. It was even difficult to get food to eat, and this was due to the bushfires. There was no rains, and the sun was really bright and hot. There could be bushfires anytime.
Some traders jacked up their prices in order to profit from the circumstance. This compelled the government to enact price control measures.
I sold plantain during those times. The soldiers will come and sell your foodstuff at control prices. They put you on a table and lash you. By God's grace, I have never been lashed. I have been selling in Malamata even before 1983. But if your foodstuff are expensive, the soldiers will sell it at control prices and beat you.
In 1983, when Ghana was in dire straits, Nigerian President Shehu Shagari took advantage of the situation to exact revenge by expelling 2 million illegal immigrants from West Africa, of which more than half were Ghanaians.
If they don't leave, they should be arrested and tried and sent back to their homes.
With more than 2 million illegal immigrants ordered to get out of Nigeria, the resulting chaos is staggering. Hundreds of thousands have now massed at Nigeria's frontier with the tiny West African state of Benin.
This was in response to Ghana's Alien Compliance Order of 1969, where many illegal foreign nationals were expelled from Ghana. At that time, Ghana was unable to cater for the influx of its own people from Nigeria. Asari, not his real name, who was 33 years in 1983 and also a deportee, had quite an experience to share with me.
I was here for 1 year, and then the quit order also came. And when the quit order came, we were coming. Our experience on the journey wasn't anything to write about.